Gettysburg Seminary presents the Seminary Explores podcast. Conversations on faith, art, people, politics, theology, life, and more, with voices from around the corner and around the globe. Welcome to the Seminary Explores. I'm Katie Giebenhein with Seminary Ridge Review. My guest is Leigh Rydberg, a storyboard artist, photographer, and film writer. She is the current artist in residence at the Gettysburg National Military Park. Leigh, welcome to the Seminary Explores.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, could you tell us about your project with the 1st Minnesota and the Battle of Gettysburg?
Yes, I kind of stumbled upon this idea about a year and a half ago. I was back in my hometown in Minnesota, and I was already researching the Civil War for some reason. I just became obsessed with this time period. And I inquired at the local history center about the soldiers that had enlisted from my hometown, and I started reading about them, and it kind of made it a more of a personal journey with my research. I knew where they were from. I knew what they faced when they joined up and mustered in and went to war, and I was able to follow their lives all the way through till when they were back in Minnesota, and some of them didn't come back, obviously, but it just sucked me in, and that's when I decided to write the screenplay.
Wow. And could you also describe a little bit about what it means to be a storyboard artist, or what storyboarding is? Some people might have an idea, and some people
if we're gonna, I had a lot of success. I've been practicing this question a lot since I got here, and the most success I've had was when it was a Civil War related answer. And so basically, the storyboard is kind of like the blueprint for the screenplay. So it's a way for the director to be like, or the art, or the production designer to be like, hey, this is what I want it to look like, guys. So it's almost like a battle plan. It's like the thing that the generals would lay out on the table, and everybody that was making decisions would stand around this document and look at it and get it and know what the plan was. And that's sort of what the storyboard is. The storyboard goes with the screenplay, so when you read the screenplay, you might have a different idea of how things would look in your head. Right. So the storyboard is kind of just keeping everybody on the same page. Well, this is what we want it to look like. This is the shot that we want. If we want to use a crane for the shot, if we want a close-up, it's kind of like it's sort of like illustrating the action of the story.
Well, and I can imagine it's such a collaborative effort to do a film that you really, really need something like that to keep people at least in the same scope.
And the storyboard artist is kind of like the workhorse, I mean, another Civil War term, I was definitely the workhorse when I was a storyboard artist on a film, and, you're sort of at the director's mercy because it's, or the production designer's mercy because it's their vision, and you're kind of like their tool. You're their eyes and their hands. So for me, it was really great with the storyboards for this because they're my storyboards, and this is how I want it to look. And and another great opportunity. I know we're going to get into this in the following questions, but another opportunity that I really, really relished was being here in Gettysburg and the surrounding areas. Like I went to Antietam the other day, and I was able to see where these places were in real life, so I could do sketches, in my head and in actual, place, rather than, relying so much on my imagination or, the contemporary pictures of the time, and sometimes there weren't pictures. One of my main characters is shot at Antietam and lays there for days, and I was able to find relatively where that was and see it. Look up at the sky and just think about it, and where the road was in relation to where he was shot, things like that. It's huge, So, usually when you're a storyboard artist, you don't necessarily know where they're going to be filming a scene. So, and also I've worked as a location scout where I would be given the storyboards and, okay, go try to find this in real life. So it's almost like taking a dream, of someone's and then trying to make it into the, taking a subconscious thing and making it into the conscious world. It's a really, but I mean, the storyboards are, they're kind of like the go-to for so many of these, different departments in the film world, so.
And actually, the battle plan is like the perfect metaphor for this too, isn't it?
It is a battle plan too.
It kind of clicked for me when you described that. I was like,
I'll have to use that in the real world too. This is a real world, but It's its own little special real world, Gettysburg.
And tell us something about your training, about your preparation for this.
Okay, boy, it's kind of a step into the unknown. I've never written a screenplay. I have every book you could possibly imagine lined up at home in my office and as well here that I dragged with me along in my car. I have a lot of people that I can go to for advice. I've been obsessively listening to podcasts. There's a really great podcast that, if anyone's listening that's interested in writing, I think his name is Jeff Goldblum. I always get his last name wrong, but it's a podcast for screenwriters. And so they interview, a lot of working screenwriters, and they talk about their process, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, how they get their movies made into films. And it's just a really good resource. I'm so sorry. Hopefully they can add at the end of this the name of the actual podcast, but that's a great resource. And just knowing that your rough draft is a rough draft, and allowing yourself to be terrible, and then just having people that you can go to that will read your screenplay, give you good advice, and just keep working at it. And it'll be, each draft will be better, as it goes. But I'm also, working too. I worked on a Woody Harrelson movie over the summer, and in the locations department, and I do photography side projects. So this is very much a labor of love. And I was given this opportunity by Gettysburg to just focus on this for a month. And had I not had this opportunity, I probably wouldn't, have been made as much progress so quickly. So it was kind of a way for me to shut the door on any future jobs and know I'm going to be here for a month, and that's it. And it really helps me, sort of make my dream into something sustainable, rather than just a little pet project that I do in my spare time.
Well, and also now that you'll be going back with a very different perspective, and you'll have a very different focus, I can imagine, when you return to Minnesota and when you're completing the project.
Yeah.
And so what has it been like you're staying in the Klingon house, right? How is it going?
Boy, it's so funny. I have to say it because this is something that was really surprising to me. So I got there and I was so excited. I've been reading about the Civil War, and it was so aesthetically beautiful, this place. You're in this beautiful farmhouse of the period, and it's just gorgeous. You can see for miles, and there's no highway, there's no pottery barn, there's no modernism really, except for a few places really far away. So I step out my door in the morning and it's 1863. But one thing that I did feel was I guess maybe I'm just sensitive to it, but I felt really sad. And I came here on the 125th anniversary when I was a little girl, and I loved it, and I took all these pictures with the little cheap kepi that I bought in the gift shop, and I just thought it was so great, and I had these really happy memories of being here as a kid, and it totally changed my life. But coming back as an adult for this project, maybe it was the undertaking that I knew I was doing. Plum Run is, just a quick walk from the house, and that's where a lot of my guys fell, and maybe that resonated. But I also had an ancestor that was in the 3rd Alabama, and he was shot on the first day's battle, and maybe that resonated. I don't know, but I was real kind of meditative, melancholy, as they called it back then, the first week that I was here. And then, I gradually, kind of pulled myself out of it and was able to, feel other emotions. But it's an emotional place. It resonates here. And a lot of people don't know that until they get here.
And you've also been able to look into some of the archives at the park, or do you want to say just a couple of other things that you've been doing in the course of your residency?
Wow, yeah. The archives here are incredible. The people that work here are incredible. There were some diaries that I didn't even know existed that they pulled for me. And, I had a moment where, like I said, I was at Antietam the other day, and then, one of the letters that they had by a soldier that I didn't even really knew existed was talking about Antietam and what it was like. And, he talked about the color bearer that was hit, and that was my guy, and here he is talking about it, and that was, it makes them feel alive. Every time you go and you see this firsthand account, of someone's diary or someone's letter. And I did this a lot in the Minnesota Historical Society room too. And you're holding this actual artifact that was there. It's just it makes it so much more real, and it feels like they're alive for just a second. When you're reading it. And as a writer, that's kind of trying to make this fictional story. I'm not trying to write it with a capital H, as Tarantino would say, but I want to try to stick as close to the real men as possible. And these little gems are truly gems. And if I wouldn't have come here, I wouldn't have been able to. I think a lot of this stuff was a recent acquisition that they got in 2008, I believe. So the family had donated it to, and bless these families for doing this and not selling it to private collectors, because everyone has an opportunity to come here to Gettysburg, anybody, and look at this stuff and learn from it, and that's a huge treasure for the American public. So that's what I loved about this place. All these museums. Your museum is absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to see it when I get out of when I finish up today. It's just wonderful.
And I have to say something when we're talking about writing in general. Something that you mentioned about first drafts, I really appreciate. You just said that it's a first draft. It's supposed to be terrible. Yeah. And I know that this, in some ways, what I'm going to say is totally veering off topic, and yet it's not, because I write about the connection between sermon writing and poetry writing. Oh. And that's also one of the things that I am very, I think is so important, is that you have to really be okay about starting off being terrible. Yeah, and you have to be, and starting off also being out of control, right? Yeah, and then later you have time to edit, and then you have to really, there's other things to do. But I think that's one of the hardest things about any kind of writing, especially when it's creative in any way. Yeah. And so I really appreciate that you said that.
Well, yeah, and like I said, I've obsessively listened to podcasts and interviews and whatever I can with other writers, because it's an unknown world that you're embarking on. And what I found, and I've been to there's another great program called AWP for writers. Oh, yes. You can go, and I went to that in Seattle a couple of years ago, and just meeting other writers, and what you find at the end of it, at the end of all of this research, I found that it's whatever works for you. Some writers do great with really solid plot structure and points that they meet along the way. Some writers, don't even know what they're writing about until they finish, and then they go back and read, and then they're like, oh, well, this is what the plot is. Some people need to have feedback to find out where to go. There's no wrong way to do it, and I think as long as your heart is in what you're doing, you're going to get to the place that you need to get to, and it's, I'll let yourself just, spill it all out and see when you and then like Stephen King has this great technique where he'll write a rough draft, and then he won't touch it for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and he'll let everybody else read it, let them write their opinion or whatever, make notes, and he stays away from it and does anything but look at it. And then when he comes back after that time and that space, then he can look at it with fresh eyes. And I think that that's something that I'm going to try to aspire to do as well. Just kind of let it resonate a little bit and think about it, and what you remember that you like that you did, and what you don't, and then when you go back and read it, see if that's the same. So it's all trial by fire, though, really.
But that's very good. It'll be interesting to see how that works for you too, and just letting it kind of sit and ripen and come back to it. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you.
And your residency is just coming to a close this week, is that correct?
On Tuesday, I believe. Tuesday. Monday or Tuesday.
Well, I wish you all the best with your next days here, and do keep the seminary posted about your evolving film project.
Oh, I will. I'd love to. I love this place, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Look for future details about Leigh's project on the Gettysburg National Military Park website. You've been listening to the Seminary Explores. I'm Katie Giedenhein with Seminary Ridge Review. My guest has been artist Leigh Rydberg. Thank you. You have been listening to the Seminary Explores from historic Seminary Ridge in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, a production of Gettysburg Seminary. We invite you to visit our website at www.ltsg.edu. Opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Gettysburg Seminary or the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America.